Hello. In today's video, I'll go over naming characters. There's a piece of advice thrown out there that the names of your characters should not start with the same letter. I'll even extend this to say there's advice that says your characters' names shouldn't sound too similar to each other, and for the most part, that is fair advice. The reason why you would want to take this advice is to avoid confusion, but a reason to pass on it would be for realism. For example, let's take two characters, one named John and the other named Joan. These two names together certainly can be confusing. They both start with the letter J, both have four letters, both only have one syllable, and the spelling is different only by one letter. And if these two characters were twins, that could be a reason why you would want to keep them named John and Joan. It's a common thing for people to name their children after themselves, a name similar to their own, after a loved one that passed away, or give their kids matching names to their siblings. So it's up to you if you want to risk the confusion for a more realistic effect. Moving on to my next point, when you're born, you don't give yourself a name. Your parents give you a name. When you're creating a character, take a moment to think, what kind of parents does this character have? Are they the sort to name their child Hope, Rain, Willow, Bear? Or are they the sort to name their child Noah, Samuel, Mary, Elijah? Or maybe the sort to name their child Theodore, Benjamin, Harriet, Gwendolyn? Or are they the sort to name their child something unique? Or the sort to name their child off of something popular? How many people were named Daenerys because of Game of Thrones, or Clark after Superman? My next talking point is nicknames, titles, or multiple names for one character. Now let's say you have two generations of Thomas. It would be confusing to call them both Thomas. The reader would keep wondering whether you are talking about the father or the son. And to help avoid that, you can call the son Junior instead of Thomas. And my advice would be to mention somewhere this character's name, but stick to that alternate name, and to not go back and forth. I remember I was watching Blind Manor, and for the life of me, I could not remember half of the characters' names. The show is centered around 7 or so characters, so it's not like I had to remember the names to a cast of 20 plus people. When I think back to the reason why I couldn't remember most of their names, it's probably because each character was called multiple things. The main character wasn't just Danielle, she was Danny, or the au pair, or Miss Clayton. Rebecca was also Bex, or Miss Jessel. And this kept happening. A singular character was called something else each time they were referenced. The only people I could remember was Owen, because he was only ever called that, and Peter Quint, because for the most part he was called his full name, or just Peter. At some point, I stopped caring about what the characters' names were and started referring to them by their job. Okay, this is the nanny, and that's the former nanny, and that's the housekeeper, and that's the gardener. I get it. There will probably be cases where a character is called something else by a different person. For example, in Once Upon a Time, the main character is Emma Swan, and Regina always calls her Miss Swan. But the thing is, everyone else calls her Emma. Even her title, the Savior, is rarely used, and when it is said in combination with her name. And then there's pet names. A woman could call her boyfriend Sweetie. To wrap up this section, you could stick to only using the nickname, or could only have one person use that nickname while everyone else uses the character's name, or have a singular character switch to using a nickname and rarely go back. Again, I don't suggest switching back and forth throughout the story. Up until this point, I've been talking about common names, but what about more unique names? Things like Voldemort, Gaia, Gandalf, Hiccup, and so on. If your story is hard set in realism, then you wouldn't necessarily want to use a name like Thor or Legolas. Yes, you could have the parent be a fan of the Marvel movies or Lord of the Rings, and thus name their child after said characters. If you were going to use a name like that, I would suggest doing so very rarely, like one character in the story. The more you go away from realism and move more towards fantasy, the easier it would be to use these kinds of unique names. If your story is full on fantasy, then using common realistic names when a majority of them are unusual would feel odd. That's not to say that you can't use only unique names in a realistic setting, just that it could be harder to do so. At the end of the day, establish what is the norm of your story and stick to that. One or two exceptions of the normal is fine, but note it could be jarring and you may need to explain why it's different. Okay, this last section is just random bits to add to the topic. When it comes to pronunciation of your characters' names, it's up to you if you want to put somewhere a phonetic spelling. If you were going to do this, I would suggest either writing that in the footnotes or maybe in a page in the front or back of the book. The next random bit would be how it could be helpful to look into the origins of a name. What names are more commonly used in what religions, during what time, by what gender, have what meaning, etc. For example, Yuri, spelled Y-U-R-I, in Japan it's a female name, and in Slavic countries like Russia, Ukraine, or Belarus, it's a male name. Next little random bit. For me, I find it easier to name a character before said character is developed. If a character is well fleshed out and doesn't have a name, then I run into the problem of, this name doesn't fit the character, and it makes finding a name so much harder. As I try to work as efficiently as possible, what I do is create a name bank. I've mentioned before that I'm a discovery writer, so if I introduce a new character, hopping over to my name bank for a moment prevents my writing from coming to a screeching halt. A name bank for me is just a list of names I wrote down that I could potentially use. I have 4 sections: names for main characters, side characters, or random minor characters, and last name. The names I like, I tend to give to the main characters. Names I feel meh about, I put under side characters. Names I don't like, either for one reason or another, go under random. And all last names go under, well, last names. When I need to fill or refill my name bank, I usually go to behind the name or behind the surname, which I'll link down below in the description. I found that the website can be very useful. To end this video, I'll say that naming characters can be difficult, and good luck. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my video. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to wear sunscreen, and I hope to see you again. Bye for now.